Dear listeners, imagine this, a sky veiled in darkness, lit only by a blood-red moon hanging above like a warning from the heavens. In the depths of a silent forest, a monstrous lion stands, its eyes glowing with fire. Blood drips from its claws. Before it, a young girl trembles, but her gaze never wavers. The wind whispers like a curse long buried in the earth. Distant cries and the cracking of dry branches echo all around. But she does not run. Instead, she steps forward. Why would she risk her life to face such terror? And what truth lies hidden behind the beast's eyes? But before we continue the story, please support this channel by liking, sharing, commenting, and subscribing. Your support means everything and gives us the spirit to share more incredible stories with you. And of course, thank you so much to those of you who have already shown your support through likes, shares, comments, and subscriptions. You are an important part of this journey. Also, do not forget to check in through the comments. Let us know where you are listening from, so we can see how far our stories have spread. Now let us return to the story. In a quiet village called Tegalasai, hidden at the foot of the mountain and wrapped in thick forest, people lived with fear in their hearts. They called it the village of fog, not because of the weather, but because sunlight rarely reached it. For the past 20 years, this village had suffered under the weight of a terrifying curse. Every full moon, a deep roar echoed from the heart of the forest. It was a sound that made children cry and drove grown men into silence. They believed it came from a cursed lion, not an ordinary one, but a massive beast with burning red eyes and fangs sharp enough to tear through ironwood. None who entered the forest ever returned. So, it became known as the Forbidden Forest. In this village lived a young girl named Laris. She stayed with her aunt near the edge of the forest. Her mother had died from a strange illness, and her father had disappeared when she was just 5 years old. Some villagers whispered that he had entered the forest and never came back. Since then, Laris had grown into a quiet, mysterious girl, different from others her age. People thought she was strange. She often sat under a large tree near the forest's edge, watching the branches sway in the wind, as if listening to the voice of the trees. But Laris did not mind. She often dreamed of a lion, not a terrifying monster, but a sad, lonely creature. In every dream, the lion looked at her with eyes full of sorrow, like it was calling for help. One night, as the full moon rose and the air grew heavy, Laris silently left her house. She carried a small bag of bread, some water, and a worn cloth that had once belonged to her father. Her heart pounded, not with fear, but with a strange certainty that her time had come. The forest was cold and silent. Moonlight slipped through the leaves, casting moving shadows on the ground. Strange sounds filled the air, the calls of night birds, the whisper of wind, and the deep breath of the forest itself. Laris walked carefully, stepping over roots and pushing through thick bushes. She did not know where she was going, but her feet seemed to move with purpose, like something unseen was guiding her. Deeper and deeper she went. The trees grew taller and closer together. The air became thicker. Then she heard it roar. Terrifying. It shook the ground beneath her. Laris froze. Her hands trembled. The sound came from her right, past a wall of stone and thick trees. Holding her breath, she followed it. And then she saw it. A lion. It was larger than she had ever imagined. Its eyes burned red. Its mane was wild and thick. But what made her stop was not fear. It was sorrow. The lion did not attack. It just stared at her. Time seemed to stop. The wind stopped blowing. Even the leaves were still. Only their eyes moved, locked in silence. The lion rose slowly. Its movements were graceful and full of power. took one step toward her, then another. Laris reached into her bag with trembling hands and placed the bread on the ground. The lion glanced at it, then back at her. It stared for a long moment. Then, without a sound, it turned away and vanished into the trees. Laris stood frozen. Her knees were weak. But her heart told her something clearly. This creature, feared by all, was not just a monster. It was the key to ending the curse on her village. And she had to return to him. The next morning, the village was already buzzing with whispers. Someone had seen a shadow moving near the forest at dawn. A large figure, silent and graceful, slipping between the trees. They spoke in hushed voices around their porches, clinging to the light of day to keep their fear away. No one knew that Laris had gone into the forest, and no one noticed when she returned just before the sky began to brighten. She had said nothing. Her clothes were dirty, her hair full of leaves, but her face was calm. Her aunt scolded her and demanded answers, but Laris only apologized and went to her room. She lay awake the rest of the morning, staring at the wooden ceiling, heart pounding not in fear, but in wonder. She had seen the lion, and he had not harmed her. For the next few days she waited. She watched the sky, feeling the pull of the forest grow stronger. Something inside her had changed. She could no longer look at the village with the same eyes. The people walked in circles of fear, passing down stories that fed the curse instead of facing it. But Laris had seen the truth. There was something broken inside that lion. A sadness that reached deeper than the forest itself. 3 nights later, under the silver half-moon, she returned to the forest. This time she brought more than just food. She carried a small flute carved by her father when she was a child, a gift she had kept hidden since his disappearance. She did not know why she brought it, only that it belonged in the forest now. The path was darker this time. Branches scratched her skin. The air was colder. She walked for hours deeper than before. There were no signs, no sounds, just the pulse of something ancient in the earth. Then, without warning, she felt it. Presence. Not footsteps. Not breathing. Just the weight of eyes watching her. She turned slowly. And there he was. The lion stood only a few steps away, half-shadowed by a tree. He looked even larger than before. His fur shimmered under the moonlight. His breath was calm, slow. His eyes did not burn this time. They searched her face, quiet and tired. Laris knelt slowly and opened the cloth that wrapped the bread and dried fish. She placed it on the moss between them and did not speak. The lion stepped forward and sniffed the food, then sat. He did not eat. He simply looked at her. Minutes passed in silence. The forest watched with them. Then Laris raised the flute to her lips and played. A simple melody. A tune her father used to hum while carving wood in the back of their house. It trembled at first, but her fingers remembered. The sound flowed like water. Not perfect, not beautiful, but true. The lion lowered his head. He closed his eyes. When she stopped, something in the air shifted. The leaves trembled though no wind passed. The lion opened his eyes and stood. Then slowly he turned and began to walk. He did not roar. He did not threaten. But he looked back. And Laris understood. She was being invited. She followed him through thick vines and over fallen logs, deeper than any villager had ever dared to go. They moved in silence, 2 shadows between the trees. The moon above flickered between branches, casting silver patterns across the forest floor. After some time they reached a clearing. There, hidden by nature and time, stood an ancient stone structure. Overgrown, cracked, forgotten. Vines climbed its walls. Symbols were etched into the stone, glowing faintly under the moonlight. It was not a temple, but it felt sacred. In the center, a pool of still water reflected the stars. And beside it, a large, broken statue of a lion, nearly identical to the creature beside her. Laris stood frozen. The lion stepped toward the statue, lowering his head as if in mourning. His breath trembled. He turned his gaze to her again, and something inside her cracked open. He was not just cursed. He was grieving. She stepped closer, unsure of what to do. Her hand brushed the stone, and the air grew thick. Visions filled her mind. Images of the past. Fire. Screams. Villagers running. A young lion chained beneath the statue, surrounded by robed figures chanting in panic. Curse cast in fear, not justice. The lion had not been the monster. He had been the protector. And they had turned on him. Laris fell to her knees, overwhelmed. Her breath hitched. She felt the lion's nose pressed gently against her shoulder. Not to comfort her, but to ask. To ask if she would help. The vision faded. The forest grew quiet again. And Laris whispered the only answer that made sense. Yes. In that moment, a wind passed through the clearing, circling them both. The trees sighed. The stars above seemed to pulse brighter. A pact had been made. But far beyond the forest, in the heart of the village, something stirred. Someone had seen her. Someone who remembered the old ways. And not everyone wanted the curse to be broken. Their fear had become their power. And they would not give it up so easily. The morning sun rose slowly over Tegalasai, casting long shadows across rooftops and narrow paths. Life continued as usual. Children fetched water. Women swept their yards. Men prepared tools for work they barely believed in anymore. But beneath this rhythm of daily life, unease had begun to stir. Mr. Wiria, the village elder, stood in front of his old wooden mirror, staring at the wrinkles under his eyes. He had led the village for over 3 decades. His voice was respected. His words followed without question. But that respect had not come without fear. Years ago, he had helped seal the forest with a ritual passed down through generations. The lion, once protector of the sacred grounds, had been cursed to roam the woods alone, bound by hatred and sorrow. The villagers had forgotten the details, but Mr. Wiria never had. He remembered the screams, the way the sky had turned red. He remembered the last look in the lion's eyes before the curse took hold. Now that same fear returned because he had seen her. He had seen Laris entering the forest. And more importantly, he had seen her return. Lone. Alive. No one should survive the forbidden forest. He tightened his grip on his cane. He could not allow her to undo what had been sealed. The curse was not just punishment. It was protection. Without it, the village would remember what they had done. And some secrets were better left buried. That afternoon, Laris sat by the river near the forest's edge, dipping her feet into the water. Her thoughts were full of images, of the lion's eyes, the broken statue, the vision of the past. She could still feel the weight of that pact. Something ancient had moved inside her, something she could not name. She knew she had to return to the clearing, to the lion, to the place where the truth waited beneath every root and stone. But she also knew someone had seen her. The village was not quiet anymore. Eyes followed her when she walked. Conversations stopped when she entered a room. Her aunt had become restless, pacing at night, mumbling prayers under her breath. The fear was spreading again. That night, under a sky full of stars, Laris slipped out of the house once more. This time she wore her father's old scarf around her shoulders. It smelled faintly of wood smoke and dried earth. It gave her strength. The forest welcomed her like a silent companion. She walked swiftly now, knowing the path, no longer afraid of the dark. The lion was waiting in the clearing, standing near the broken statue as if he had never moved. His eyes lit up when he saw her, not with fire but with recognition. Laris stepped forward. Her voice trembled as she spoke. "I need to understand what happened. I saw the curse. I saw what they did to you. But I do not know why. Why did they betray you?" The lion did not answer with words. Instead, he circled the statue and pressed his massive paw against a stone at its base. A hidden mechanism shifted. Part of the ground trembled and opened, revealing a staircase leading deep into the earth. Laris hesitated, then followed. The stairs led into a chamber carved from ancient rock. The walls were covered in drawings, old stories etched in dust and stone. She passed images of a golden lion standing beside humans, protecting them from wild beasts. Another drawing showed the villagers kneeling before the lion in thanks. But further in, the images changed. Fire. Or a new leader with a crooked staff, whispering into ears, spreading fear. Then came the betrayal. The protector was blamed for the chaos. Game. Cursed. Buried. At the very end of the chamber, Laris found a mirror made of obsidian, smooth and deep like water. When she looked into it, the reflection did not show her face. It showed her father. He stood in the same chamber years ago, placing his hand on the lion's paw. He had known. He had come here searching for the truth. But behind him a shadow rose, a man holding a ceremonial blade. "Mr. Wiria." Laris gasped. Her father had discovered the truth, and he had paid the price. The mirror faded. The lion stood beside her now, unmoving. Outside the chamber, the forest howled. A storm was brewing. Not of rain, but of memory and revenge. Laris stepped out of the chamber with fire in her eyes. She would not run. She would not be silent. The truth lived beneath the village, buried in stone and lies. And now it had found a voice. But as she climbed back into the moonlight, she saw torches flickering in the distance. The villagers were coming. And at their head, holding a staff carved with symbols of the old order, stood Mr. Wiria. The forest would burn again. Unless Laris could stop it. The night was thick with tension as Laris crouched behind a low ridge at the edge of the forest, her breath shallow and sharp. Below her, dozens of villagers moved through the trees with torches in their hands, their faces tight with fear and anger. Their shadows danced against the tree trunks, distorted by the firelight like ghosts from forgotten legends. Mr. Wiria walked at the front, his posture straight, the ceremonial staff clutched firmly in his grip. Every few steps he paused, listening not with his ears, but with something deeper, more ancient. He could feel the forest resisting. The deeper they walked, the more the trees seemed to pull together, the branches reaching down like arms to stop them. But he pressed forward. He had to end this. He had spent his life keeping the past sealed, and he would not allow a girl, no matter how brave, to tear it open. Laris could feel the forest pulsing around her, as if it too feared what was coming. She didn't know how to stop a crowd full of rage. She didn't even fully understand what she had awakened. But she knew this: if they found the lion, they would try to destroy him again. And this time he might not survive. She ran back toward the clearing, her steps faster than ever before, her heart pounding in her ears. When she arrived, the lion was no longer alone. The ground was trembling, and from the shadows emerged creatures she had never seen, beings made of roots and bark, old spirits of the forest awakened by her presence. They stood beside the lion, not as soldiers but as guardians, silent, ancient, and watchful. Laris turned to the lion. "They're coming," she whispered. "We don't have much time." The lion stepped forward, his eyes scanning the treeline. He did not roar. He did not run. He only waited, as if this moment had been written long ago and now could no longer be avoided. The torches appeared soon after. Dozens of villagers broke through the trees, surrounding the clearing with fire and noise. They shouted warnings, threats, prayers. Some trembled. Some clutched weapons with unsteady hands. And then Mr. Wiria stepped into the clearing. His eyes locked with Laris's. "You've done something foolish, girl," he said calmly. "You've opened the gate to the past. Do you have any idea what that means?" Laris stepped in front of the lion, shielding him with her body. "I've seen what happened. You betrayed him. You used fear to control everyone. You lied to protect yourself." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Mr. Wiria's face remained still, but his grip on the staff tightened. "I protected this village from the truth," he said. "The truth is dangerous, divides, burns. I gave these people peace. You gave them a prison," Laris shot back. "You turned a guardian into a monster and called it justice." The lion let out a low, guttural sound. Not a growl of threat, but one of sorrow. His eyes were fixed not on Mr. Wiria, but on the villagers, the same people he once swore to protect. Mr. Wiria raised the staff. "This ends now." He slammed the bottom of it against the earth. The ground cracked, and dark energy shot outward like a ripple. The spirits of the forest recoiled, some fading into the shadows, others retreating behind the lion. The clearing shook. Laris stumbled but did not fall. She shouted to the villagers, her voice loud and full of urgency. "Look at him. Does he look like a monster? He is still the same guardian your ancestors trusted. He was betrayed. And if we don't stop this now, we will become the same monsters who destroyed him." A child's voice broke through the silence. "He's crying." All heads turned. A small boy at the edge of the crowd pointed at the lion, who indeed had tears streaming down his great golden face. The crowd shifted uneasily. Mr. Wiria's lips twisted into a grimace. "You're being fooled by emotion. He is not what he was. The curse." "There is no curse," Laris interrupted. "Only guilt." The lion stepped forward slowly, carefully. He lowered his head toward Mr. Wiria, not in submission but in sorrow. His eyes were full of memories, of villages rebuilt, children saved from the river, celebrations beneath the stars. He had not forgotten, and neither had the forest. A sudden wind blew through the clearing, extinguishing every torch but one. Mr. Wiria stood firm, but for the first time, doubt flickered in his eyes. Behind him, the villagers began to murmur once more. Some dropped their weapons. Others looked at the lion, then at Laris, then back at Mr. Wiria. Something was shifting. But just as Laris stepped forward, ready to speak again, the obsidian mirror in the underground chamber began to crack. Deep beneath the earth, the forgotten seal, set long ago to bind the lion's spirit, was beginning to break. The forest held its breath. And Mr. Wiria, sensing that his power was slipping, made a choice. He raised the staff again, this time with both hands. He would end it. All of it. Even if it meant destroying the forest. Even if it meant destroying himself. The staff began to glow with a dark red light, and the ground trembled once more. And Laris, without hesitation, stepped between him and the lion, arms outstretched, voice steady, heart on fire. The moment of reckoning had come. But what would break first? The staff, the curse, or the hearts of the people? The red light from Mr. Wiria's staff burned brighter, pulsing like a dying star as the earth beneath the clearing began to split open in thin, jagged veins. A heavy silence fell over the villagers. No one moved. No one breathed. Even the forest seemed to recoil in fear. Lara stood between the lion and the man who once claimed to protect them all. Her arms trembled not from fear, but from the power humming through the ground. It was old, angry, and waking after decades of silence. "Step aside," Mr. Wiria hissed. "You do not understand the force you're meddling with." "I understand enough," Laris replied, her voice low and steady. "You want to erase the past because it threatens the lie you built. But we cannot build peace on silence. Not anymore." A gust of wind roared through the clearing, sending sparks from the single remaining torch swirling into the air. The lion stepped forward, his golden mane catching the firelight. He did not roar. He did not snarl. He simply stood at Laris's back, waiting for the truth to speak. Mr. Wiria's staff cracked suddenly, a thin split running from the top to the base. His eyes widened as the glow turned unstable. No, this is not how it ends. But the forest had already decided. From the trees the spirits returned, tall, shifting figures of bark and light, their eyes glowing with deep sadness. They circled the clearing like witnesses to a long overdue reckoning. And then, from the broken ground, rose a vision. It was the past, summoned by the breaking seal. A shimmering illusion formed above the cracked earth, showing the day the lion was betrayed. The villagers saw it all. The false accusations, the manipulation, the way Mr. Wiria, younger and full of ambition, had turned fear into power. Gasps echoed across the crowd. A woman dropped to her knees. A man covered his mouth. The truth was unbearable. Laris turned to face them. He wasn't the monster. We were. Mr. Wiria stumbled backward. The staff now sizzled with heat, the air around it warping like smoke. His hand shook. His face twisted in fury and shame. "I did what I had to do," he said, voice cracking. "The village needed unity. It needed someone to blame. But you chose the one who protected us," Laris said, tears in her voice. "And now you're trying to destroy him again to keep your lie alive." With a sudden, broken cry, Mr. Wiria lifted the staff high above his head. The lion growled, a deep, trembling sound that made the air shudder, but did not move. Laris stepped forward and placed her hand on the staff. The moment her skin touched the ancient wood, a blinding light exploded from the core. A wave of energy surged outward, knocking everyone to the ground. The spirits cried out in a language lost to time. The trees bent low, their roots writhing like serpents. Laris did not let go. She closed her eyes and whispered, "I forgive you." The staff shattered. Mr. Wiria collapsed, and the curse broke. The light faded slowly. The air turned still. Laris opened her eyes to see the villagers rising, dazed and silent. Mr. Wiria knelt on the ground, staring at his empty hands. His power was gone. So was the lie. The lion stepped forward, pressing his great head gently against Laris's shoulder. Warmth filled her chest, a weight lifting she hadn't known she carried. Above them the sky had changed. The stars seemed closer. The forest no longer whispered in fear, but in relief. But something was still missing. From the broken seal, a voice called out, soft, familiar. Laris turned, and saw her father. Not alive but not quite gone either. A memory held in the roots of the earth. "You did what I couldn't," he said with a soft smile. "You brought the truth home." She stepped toward him, but he was already fading, returning to where memory sleeps and the forest remembers. Tears rolled down her cheeks. "I miss you," she whispered. The lion sat beside her. The villagers began to approach, slowly, humbly. Some offered apologies. Others could not find words. But the silence they shared was not empty. It was the beginning of something new. From that night on, the clearing became sacred once more. Not a place of fear but of memory, of healing, of truth. But peace is never born without cost. And Laris, though her journey had begun in fear, now carried the weight of hope. And the forest, once silent, sang again. The days that followed were heavy with silence and slow restoration. The villagers no longer avoided the forest. They entered it cautiously, reverently, as if crossing into sacred ground. The old legends they once feared were now stories of mourning and guilt, and Laris found herself at the center of it all, half hero, half wound. Each morning, she returned to the clearing where the lion waited. He no longer hid in the shadows. His presence was open now, calm, regal, and watchful. The spirits still lingered in the trees, their shapes soft like smoke at dusk. The forest was no longer a cage of secrets but a sanctuary for healing. But not everyone was ready to forgive. Some elders met in whispers behind closed doors. Others avoided Laris altogether, their eyes filled with unease. They feared what she represented: change, truth, the unraveling of the power that had shaped their quiet lives for generations. One evening, Mr. Wiria returned to the clearing, his face thinner, his steps slower. He wore no staff, no robe, only his age and the consequences of his past. Laris watched him from across the grass as he knelt before the lion, not as an equal, but as a man stripped of pride. "I was wrong," he said simply. "I chained you with lies and called it protection. I do not ask for your forgiveness. Only your silence, if that's all I deserve." The lion said nothing, but he lowered his head once, a gesture of quiet recognition. Laris stood beside them both and asked no questions. From that night, Mr. Wiria never returned to the council. He lived in a small hut near the forest edge, growing his own food and speaking only when spoken to. To many he was a broken man. But to Laris, he was proof that truth, though cruel, could lead even the proudest soul toward humility. The village began to change. Children played near the trees again. Songs were sung in the evenings that hadn't been heard in decades. People began telling the story, not just of the lion's betrayal, but of his forgiveness. Of the girl who stood between a weapon and a guardian. Of the night the forest chose truth over silence. But Laris felt something stirring deeper still. One morning, as she sat beside the lion, she noticed his eyes fixed on the horizon. "What is it?" she asked softly. The lion rose and walked to the edge of the clearing. His golden fur shimmered in the morning light, and the earth beneath his paws seemed to pulse with a quiet urgency. "There is more," he seemed to say with his presence. This was not the end. It was only the unlocking. That night, Laris dreamed of fire. Not flames that destroyed, but flames that revealed. She stood at the center of the forest, surrounded by whispers not from trees, but from beneath the ground. The roots trembled. The earth cracked open, not in violence but in truth. She saw visions of other guardians, other lions, sleeping beneath distant lands, their spirits bound not by betrayal, but by forgetfulness. When she awoke, her hands were trembling. She ran to the lion. "I saw them," she whispered. "There are others like you, aren't there?" The lion's eyes glowed softly in the moonlight. Then he turned, and for the first time he walked beyond the clearing. Laris followed. The trees parted not in fear, but in welcome. The spirits moved like streams of light through the underbrush, guiding their path. And behind them, unseen but listening, were the first footsteps of villagers willing to believe again. Their journey led them deeper than she had ever gone, past rivers that shimmered with memory, past stones carved with forgotten names, until they reached a cave veiled in vines. Inside, the walls were etched with old symbols, markings of lions, wolves, bears, and birds, each guardian of a different land, each betrayed, forgotten, or lost. Laris touched the wall and felt a hum of energy surge through her fingertips. "This is not just your story," she whispered to the lion. "It's ours." He turned to her, eyes filled with pride. She knew then that the forest had given her more than a second chance. It had given her a purpose, not just to heal, but to awaken, to protect the truth wherever it had been buried, to stand again between fear and understanding, and to walk with the lion, not as a savior, not as a hero, but as a keeper of memory, bound by courage and the promise of what must never be silenced again. The deeper Laris and the lion traveled into the ancient forest, the more the world around them shifted. The trees grew taller, their branches woven so tightly overhead that only streaks of light spilled through. The air carried a different scent here, moss, ash, and something old, like a memory refusing to fade. They followed trails that no one had walked in centuries, paths marked by broken stones with faded symbols that pulsed faintly when Laris passed. The lion moved with certainty, his paws never hesitating, as though each step was guided by something beyond sight. Laris followed in silence, her heart full of questions, her spirit pulled forward by something she couldn't yet name. The spirits became quieter here. Not gone but subdued, like watchers too ancient to interfere. And then they found it. An altar sunken into the earth, overgrown with thick vines and roots that pulsed like veins. At the center stood a stone monolith, cracked, moss-covered, and half-swallowed by time. Carved into its face was the image of a lion, wings outstretched, a single tear falling from one eye. Laris approached slowly. The lion stood beside her, eyes fixed on the stone, unmoving. "What is this place?" she whispered. She didn't expect an answer, but the forest responded. The ground rumbled, soft at first, like a low breath exhaled from the earth's lungs. The vines writhed and fell away from the altar. The stone began to glow, dimly at first, then stronger, revealing words hidden for generations. Laris leaned closer. It was a vow, a promise made by the first protectors of the land, those chosen not for their strength, but for their hearts. The guardians, creatures of great power who had once walked beside humankind, guiding them, defending them, bound to them by mutual trust. But trust had been broken, by fear, by greed, by lies. One by one, the guardians had vanished, betrayed, hunted, forgotten. Their names erased from the songs, their truth buried beneath legends twisted by time. Laris stepped back. Tears filled her eyes. "All this time," she whispered, "we thought they were the curse." The lion turned to her, lowering his head gently, as if to say, "You were not alone in believing the wrong things." Laris felt the weight of it all press against her chest. The lies, the silence, the centuries of lost voices buried beneath the soil. And yet, beneath that grief, there was something else, a flicker of resolve. She placed her hand on the stone and made her own vow. "I will remember you. All of you." The moment she spoke, the ground beneath the altar cracked open. From within, light poured out, not fire but memory. It rose into the sky like a signal, a beam of truth piercing through the heavy canopy, reaching beyond the forest. Far away, in villages nestled among mountains and valleys, in deserts and by rivers, old eyes blinked open. Animals once thought extinct stirred. Forgotten guardians breathed again. The world had heard the call, but not all who heard would welcome it. As Laris and the lion turned to leave the altar, the wind shifted. The forest grew tense. Branches stiffened. The air turned colder. Presence was moving, not of spirit but of flesh. They were being watched. From behind the trees, figures emerged, cloaked, silent and masked. They wore robes of midnight blue, stitched with gold thread that shimmered unnaturally. Their faces were hidden, but their presence radiated control, discipline and danger. One stepped forward. "You've awakened something that was meant to stay buried," he said in a voice smooth like water over stone. Laris stepped protectively in front of the lion. "Who are you?" "The keepers of silence," the man replied. "We exist to maintain balance, even if that balance is built on secrets." "You mean lies," Laris said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. The man tilted his head. "Sometimes the world is not ready for the truth. You may have undone one curse, girl. But in doing so, you have threatened the world's order." The lion growled low and warning. But Laris did not step back. "I don't care about your order," she said. "I care about what's right." The man raised a gloved hand. The others stepped forward surrounding her. "For that defiance," he said, "you and the lion must be silenced." Laris braced herself. The forest held its breath. And somewhere in the distance, a second roar answered the lion's call. Deep, thunderous, and ancient. Another guardian had awakened. The keepers froze, their heads turning toward the sound. Laris felt her pulse quicken. She looked at the lion beside her, who stood tall and unshaken. "We're not alone anymore," she whispered. Then the ground trembled, and the forest prepared for war. The tremor beneath Laris's feet was no longer a whisper. Roared. Birds burst from the treetops in a frantic cloud of wings. Leaves shook loose and spiraled downward as the earth began to groan, deep and primal. The keepers of silence, those cloaked men of shadow and control, tightened their formation around Laris and the lion. Their hands moved quickly to draw strange silver weapons that shimmered like polished bone, humming with a magic born from centuries of secrets. Laris did not flinch. The lion stepped forward. And then, from the trees behind them, the second guardian emerged. A massive black wolf, eyes like molten gold, stepped into the clearing with slow, deliberate power. Its breath came in rhythmic gusts, and in each exhale, the temperature dropped as if winter itself followed in its wake. Scars covered its chest, ancient and deep, wounds from battles never spoken of. But its gaze was locked not on Laris, not even on the lion, but on the keepers. The cloaked men shifted uneasily. The leader barked a sharp command in a language Laris did not know, and half of his followers turned to face the wolf. The rest closed in on her and the lion. The standoff cracked. Like thunder. The lion lunged first, his golden mane flaring as he met the blades with teeth and muscle. The wolf sprang into the air, cutting through the trees with terrifying grace. Laris ran for cover, dodging blasts of magical light that scorched the forest floor. Screams filled the air. Not just human, not just beast. The forest itself seemed to cry out, each tree vibrating with grief and rage. Spirits, dozens of them, poured from the trees, their forms blazing like fireflies, swarming the intruders with bursts of light and sorrow. These were the memories of the land, and they had chosen their side. Laris crouched behind a fallen trunk, her heart slamming inside her chest. She watched as the lion tore through two keepers in one motion, his claws breaking their weapons like brittle twigs. The wolf stood over another, pinning him to the earth, its breath turning the ground to frost. But it was not enough. The leader of the keepers raised both arms, summoning a storm of shadow above his head. The sky dimmed. The spirits screamed and scattered. Lara stood screaming. "No!" She ran toward him, her legs burning with fear and fury. The lion saw her. So did the wolf. But neither could reach her in time. The shadow burst downward like a spear of black lightning. And stopped, frozen, bitter, caught between two glowing hands. Mr. Wiria. His form was gaunt, his breath shallow, but his presence undeniable. He stood like a man carved from defiance, the dark energy clashing against his will. His voice, when it came, cracked like firewood. "No more silence." The leader snarled. "You betrayed your own." Mr. Wiria shook his head. "I betrayed myself. And I will not let this child carry my sins." He turned to Laris, his face softened. "Finish what I could not." And with a final breath, he crushed the darkness in his hands. The blast threw everyone to the ground. Laris crawled to Mr. Wiria's side, tears streaking her cheeks. He smiled once, eyes already clouding. "You reminded me what truth feels like," he whispered. "Thank you." Then he was still. The battle slowed. The keepers, now leaderless, faltered. One by one, they vanished into smoke, retreating into the shadows of their forgotten order. The forest fell quiet once more, broken only by the gentle rustle of leaves and the soft cries of spirits returning to peace. Laris stood, heart torn but proud. The lion approached, nudging her hand. The wolf sat beside them both, its golden eyes watchful. All three turned toward the altar, now shining with steady light. It pulsed gently as if it breathed. Guardians had awakened. The silence was broken. But Laris knew this was not the end. This was the beginning of a world where lies would no longer rule, where fear would not silence memory. The guardians, once scattered and sleeping, were rising. And she, just a girl once overlooked by her own village, would become their voice, their bridge, their keeper. As dawn broke, light painted the forest gold. The lion roared. The wolf howled. And Laris, standing between them, closed her eyes. The world was listening now. And it would never forget again. Dear listeners, from the journey of Laris and the lion guardian of the forbidden forest, we are reminded of the power of courage, kindness, and sincerity. In a world that often measures strength by force, Laris proved that a pure heart and a determined spirit can tame even the wildest of beasts. She did not choose revenge. She did not run away, even when fear tried to crush her. Instead, through compassion and the bravery to listen and understand, Laris touched the soul of a creature long seen as dangerous. Through that act of kindness, she not only freed the lion, but lifted an entire village from a curse born of fear and lies. This story teaches us that truth can be buried by those who seek control. But as long as even one person dares to question, to search, and to hope, truth will always find a way to rise. Laris was not a hero in the traditional sense. She was not a warrior, nor a sorcerer. She was just an ordinary girl, with extraordinary courage. It also shows us that not everything we fear is truly evil, and not everything that appears pure is good. Sometimes the world hides truth behind masks. But change begins with those who are brave enough to stand alone, to walk against the current, and to see beyond appearances. May this story inspire us to be people who listen, who believe in goodness, and who have the strength to face darkness with light. Please remember, this story is a work of fiction, crafted to feel real so it can serve as a source of motivation, reflection, and life lessons. Any resemblance to real persons or events is purely coincidental. Thank you for listening until the end. If you enjoyed this story, please support the channel by liking, sharing, commenting, and subscribing. Your comments mean so much to us, and don't forget to tell us where you're listening from. We'd love to know how far our stories have reached. See you again in our next emotional and meaningful tale.